Hi everyone, it's Cass. Welcome back to my channel, What Cass Read. Today, I'm actually bringing you a wrap-up. If you haven't noticed on my channel, I didn't do a wrap-up for September, and then I didn't do a wrap-up in October, and that's because life just totally happened. The fall time tends to be pretty busy for me anyway at work, but if you've been following along with me on my social media, if you've been following along on this channel, my Papa Zane, my grandfather, passed away back in September, and then 3 weeks later I was on a plane to go to Hawaii for his memorial service, so that's why I didn't really post any videos in October. And then, to top it all off, okay, listen to this. As soon as I got back from Hawaii, my dad had a heart attack, and then my brother's dog was hit by a car. What? Needless to say, I'm very happy that October is over. I'm ready to put all of that bad luck behind me. We are in November now, and we're ready to turn a new leaf. So here we are. For the 2 months, I read 12 books. Let's begin. So the first book that I did end up finishing in the month of September, this is The Black Prism, written by Brent Weeks. This is book number 1 of the Lightbringer series, and the last book, Burning White, literally just came out this fall, so the series is now complete, and I am finally getting the first book off of my TBR. This has been a book that's been on my TBR for ages, and it was on my year-long TBR, so I desperately wanted to get to it, and I'm pretty happy that I did. I did rate this 4.5 out of 5 stars. It wasn't a bad start to a series. As a matter of fact, I really liked it a lot, except for one of the main characters. Let's see, this is in a fantasy world where it's kind of like an emperor, but he's not really an emperor. At least this character doesn't view himself as an emperor, but everyone else does. And that is the prism. The prism controls all of the colors, and that's where they wield their magic from. This magic system is based off of colors, so he's extremely powerful because he's able to wield all of the powers of the different colors. Then there are 7 different satrapies throughout the kingdom, and different areas and the different satrapies are controlled by different people who would generally have one favorable color over the other. All of the different satrapies will send their young, promising people to the Chromaria, which is where everybody learns how to harness their different colors. A lot of them are sponsored, a lot of them are rich on their own. This just has a really great backstory for the world, because within the different satrapies, there's some prejudices against different nations. You have the upper class, you have the lower class, all working within the Chromaria, and then the people outside the Chromaria who don't believe that that is the best use of their color magic. So we follow a number of different characters. The young character that I just was super annoyed with is Kip. He is a young man of 15 years old. We meet him because his city has been burned to the ground and he needs to escape and he needs to flee. Then we also follow the story of the Prism. There are 2 brothers. There's Gavengyle and Dazengyle, and both found themselves with the power of the prism, and it led to this big war in the continent. It led to a power struggle, and these 2 characters are what really what the story is really centered around. So even though I didn't really like Kip and he was a little bit whiny for my tastes, that's why I still rated it 4.5 out of 5 stars. So like I said, just a really promising start to a series. Really excited that I finally got this off of my TBR. And I will say that this story, without giving too much away, but it did give me Man in the Iron Mask vibes. So if you know what I'm talking about, and if you've read this story, maybe you can understand why I think that. But it was very intriguing, and I love this, and I will be continuing on with the series. Okay, so after I finished The Black Prism, I'll be honest, that was toward the end of a readathon, and I was getting very, very burnt out. So September was supposed to be this really great reading month for me, and I don't know if I was going to try to attempt another readathon, but it did not happen. So what do I do when my reading goes south? I pick up the Harry Potter series and try and get it back going again. So that's what ended up happening for me. I picked up in the month of, well, I don't actually know which months. They're all blending together now. But I did, in between Black Prism and the next book, I did end up reading Sorcerer's Stone, because first book, super easy to fly through. And then after that, I did finish up Lethal White. So I talked about this book because I did a little bit of a switcheroo with a book haul. This story centers around Camoran and Robin trying to prevent a plot against one of the members of parliament. And that's only like the first part of the book, and then the second half of the book follows along with a murder mystery as these things go along. I I think this might have been my favorite out of the whole series so far. I think as the series has gone on, I've enjoyed the mysteries more and more and more. What did I end up rating this one? This one had to have been a 5-star. Yes, I rated this one 5 out of 5 stars. It might have been the only one in the whole series that I did give 5 stars to. But anyways, loved it, super glad that I ended up picking this up. And this book, because it's like a crime thriller, this is what really sparked my interest and my thought process to start collecting a few more crime and mystery thrillers for the fall. So it's really down to this book that made me look up some other ones that you saw in my last book haul. Then I ended up picking up God's Grave. So I think I might have been doing these two simultaneously, Lethal White and God's Grave. I ended up rating God's Grave 4 out of 5 stars. I liked it, but I did not like it as much as Nevernight. Nevernight just completely blew my mind. This one was really great and a really great middle part of the trilogy. I have yet to start on Dark Dawn, but I like where the story was headed. So again, book number 2, we follow Mia Corvair in her quest for revenge. This follows the events of the initiation into the Red Church, and the events that took place during the initiation. There's plenty of deaths that surround Mia. There's some betrayal that surrounds Mia. There's just a general questioning of whether or not she belongs in the Red Church. All of these events and life sequences have led her to these gladiator games. She decides to sell herself to this, like, for lack of a better term, a gym, where she is enslaved, and then they fight in these gladiator rings and these gladiator settings. So super cool premise, but I don't think it was as gory as Nevernight, which is kind of funny. But really great to be back with Mia Corvair, and then the events that like ended this book, I feel like were a good setup for Dark Dawn. But when I finished this book didn't make me like immediately need to rush out and start Dark Dawn, even though I had it in my hands. The way that Nevernight, as soon as I was done with that, I immediately felt like I needed to rush and get my hands and read God's Grave. Does that make sense? So that's why this was a 4 out of 5 stars. Then the reading slump, not reading slump, but just like this, I was trudging through things, continued. It continued so much so that I finished Chamber of Secrets. I moved straight on to Prisoner of Azkaban. And then, yes, I did move straight on to the Goblet of Fire and finish Goblet of Fire, The Order of the Phoenix, before I even picked up my very next book. So then that brings us into the month of October. And the first, like, brand new book that wasn't Harry Potter that I picked up in the month of October ended up being The Dreadful Tale of Prospero Reading, written by Alexandra Bracken. This is a middle grade novel that follows Prospero Reading, so it's the Prospero Reading series, and it's this young boy named Prospero Reading who's a part of this like really prominent New England family, and their family ancestor made a deal with a demon to grant like power and riches to the family, and it's kind of trickled down into the line of the family. So Prospero Reading and his sister are the last descendants of this line, and Prosper finds himself inhabited by this demon, and he doesn't know what to do to get rid of him. This was surprisingly like the spoopy Halloween read that I didn't know I was going to pick up. I didn't know that I needed. But I think I was just like, okay, you need to pick something up. Like, try picking up anything that's related to Halloween, maybe. I don't know, but I wasn't planning on reading this book, and then I did, and I really did enjoy this one. So what did I rate this one? This one was another 4 out of 5 star read. The atmosphere, the vibe of this totally spoke to me about Halloween, because this book takes place in Massachusetts, and there's a little bit of time that we spend in Salem. We meet a young witch. We have like magical creatures. We have this magical demon. It was awesome. It was all the things that I really wanted and appreciated for the spooky season. Okay, so then the next book that I ended up picking up, I was listening to this on audiobook, and this one I did DNF because I've been working on the TV show, and if you saw me on Goodreads, I said that the TV show was better. And that is You, written by Carolyn Kepnes. I started watching the Netflix show, and then I was like, oh, maybe I should listen to this on audiobook and just kind of see where some of the differences are. And it follows this young man named Joe who is stalking this woman And he is just like thoroughly obsessed with her. He works in a bookstore and he kind of stages this meet cute with her. Her friends don't trust her, but her friends are also like really shitty people. The TV show is much better. So if you're on Netflix and you're looking for something to watch, I would suggest I wouldn't suggest the reading of it. It's all told through Joe's perspective. It's all told in second person because he's talking to you. It didn't, like, as a book, I can see why it was intriguing. They use Penn Badgley as Joe. He just does such a great job of, like, communicating so much with just his face, because we get a lot of this voiceover aspect, which you get from the book, but when you see Penn Badgley on screen, like, his facial reactions to what the voiceover is saying are amazing. Like, he communicates so much with his face, and there's just a lot of things that they can explore with a visual medium that I feel like I was missing from the audiobook. To continue things on, I did end up finishing The Half-Blood Prince. Okay, and then the final book that I finished for the month of October. Finished it just in the nick of time. This is Magus Blood, written by David Hare. This is book number 1 of the Moontide Quartet. And this was actually the first book that we read for my book club, the Big Ass Book Club. This book is, I used to describe it as this like East meets West kind of battle, but it's a lot more than that. It follows a very large cast of characters. It's a very large scope, but is very easy to follow along with. So there are these 2 continents, Antioquia and Euros. Every 12 years there's an event called the Moontide. There's a bridge between the 2 continents called the Leviathan Bridge, and during Moontide the tides are so low that the bridge is able to be visible across the water, across these 2 continents, and the 2 different continents go to war with one another. But aside from that, we follow all of these different characters as we're leading up to the Moontide. So the start of this book takes place 1 year before the Moontide, and we're getting closer and closer and closer and closer. And what have all these events been leading up to it? I was really impressed with this. I give it 4 out of 5 stars. It was so massive in scope. Like, we cover so much in 1 year amongst all of these different characters. We cover so much in terms of all the different cultural aspects as to why this Moontide is really important and as to why these different nations end up going to war. But even more so than that, like, aside from like the buildup, you would think it's just like they hate each other because they're from different continents. There's different intercontinental battles and prejudices going on amongst the different nations of Euros, amongst the different nations of Antioquia. And I thought that was really fascinating to follow along with. So we have a lot of younger characters, which I really liked. We had a lot of like really strong female characters that I really liked. This ended up being more desert fantasy than I was anticipating as well. Like, this cover does not tell me much about this setting, which, how could it, because it covered so much. Like, I thought this would definitely be like more of a European flair to it, and while we do have characters who are from Euros, the European continent, I found that the desert fantasy scenes were much more compelling. The one thing that why I brought this down to a 4-star instead of a 5-star was that I feel like this took like way too much inspiration from our actual world. So like, you can tell which one is Europe, you can tell which one is Asia, the different historical battles that have taken place, like all the different cultures, they're very much like rooted, like this one felt like the Indian culture, this one felt like the Scandinavian culture, this one felt like the Middle Eastern culture. So like, you could really pinpoint where that inspiration was drawn from. And it's not like David Hare tried that hard to hide it either. So that's why I brought it down to a 4-star, but it was still a really great read. I'd highly recommend it to anybody. As a matter of fact, in my next video that I'm about to film, I'm going to recommend this book because I just think it was, this is kind of like a dark horse on my TBR. It's been sitting there for forever, and I just kind of like glossed it over, and I don't think you should. I think it's a really great read. So yeah, Magus Blood by David Hare. Okay, so we'll actually have to see how long this video ended up being when I combined the 2 months worth of wrap-ups. But there were mostly 4-star reads, 5-star read. Aside from You was the only really low read that I had. So like, maybe it's all just like in my brain and in my head that this these last 2 months ended up being such bad reading months when I got 6 out of 7 Harry Potter books read, and of course those are 4s and 5s. But aside from that, the new books that I read, I did have 1 5-star, and I only DNF'd 1, so there we go. Not been able to catch up with very many people on BookTube, and for that I apologize. But please let me know what you're reading right now and how you're doing, how you're feeling about it. And of course you can follow me on my social media if you want to. I'm on Instagram and Twitter. It's at whatcassread, same as this channel, so it's super easy to find. And of course you can always find my Goodreads link listed down below. Other than that, you know how these videos end. I'll talk to you later.